It's a long weekend here, and it's also very wet. It's been raining the last 2 days straight, which is good because we actually ran out of water in one of our tanks. Everything was getting very dry, so we ended up pumping water out of Humpty, the garage tank there, up to the main house one. And then luckily it started raining, so both tanks are now full. We went from 30-degree weather to about 15-degree weather in a day, so it was a bit of a shock. But I've been out in the shed and a few things. I got my zinc electrode, so I was able to finish zinc plating some of these pulleys and things. And you can now sort of get an idea of how that works. A bit hard to see, but there's a pulley up here and another one down here. And that takes the cable back to the middle here. I still can't fit that until I get all this out of the way. But that's coming along. I did play with swapping around the controls on here, but it turns out you do need the longer one to have enough clearance next to the gear lever. And because I went and got more welding gas last week, I have been playing with the rocker gear for this engine. And I've got several sets of rocker gear. And what I ended up doing was, this is the best set. And then I took the worst set and I rebuilt the faces of them with some hard-facing TIG rod and ground them back to shape. And this is where it gets interesting, because I'm not exactly certain what the shape needs to be or the radius on it. And these ones have been untouched. I'm going to leave these how they are, but you can see how you get a little wear pattern, which is the end of the valve stem where the rocker arm is hitting the end of the valve stem. You can sort of see down inside there maybe. There's the end of the valve. The rocker's pushed directly on that. So these are the shafts that go through. To set all of this up, I've set up the heads with the proper gaskets and everything so all the heights are correct. And I machined up a small pin. And what that lets me do is, I can get this through here. That let me set up individual rockers to figure out exactly how they interact with the end of the valve guide. And it's pretty much what you would expect. You'd expect that to be a fairly flat contact face where it touches the valve. These are kind of all over the place. They're, I think they're forged parts originally. You can sort of see the marks around the side, and they're all different. So they're all different thicknesses and different widths and different finishes. You can see the difference in width off the pads, maybe. So these are old, of course. I don't know how ground these have been or what's been done with them. If you compare those two, you can see quite a difference in width. Not that it matters as long as it could touch the end of the valve stem. And you can see on this one, it was a little bit off center. So I've done the best I can with the ones I've made up. And what I ended up doing was building a little sort of jig with an arm. So this pivots, and this would let me put this up against the side of the grinding wheel and get the right angle on it, and you just get a little bit of movement on it. You do have to do it sort of by feel, but once I've done a couple of them, it wasn't too bad. Because you've got rocker arms in both directions, that's why there are washers there to change the height so that I can keep it on the center line of the grinding wheel. And that worked fairly well. I'm sure there's a scientific way that all of this is supposed to be figured out. and the proper radiuses and the proper contact angles and all that kind of stuff. I haven't found any of that documented anywhere, and I suspect over the years people just grind them by hand and it all works. It's not a race engine. Hopefully it should all be fine. So I'll have to decide which set I'm going to use, the ones I've made up or this original set. Like I say, these are original, meaning they've been untouched by me, but I have no idea who else has touched them in the last 80, 90 years. You can buy new ones of these, but they're £50 each. So, we're talking 800 to 1,000 New Zealand dollars just for the rocker arms. And I know it will work with these. And the worst that can happen is one breaks. So it's worth getting everything running with these, and then later on I can redo the top end. Because of course the rocker boxes just lift off and the rocker gear is attached to them. It's not attached to the head. These gaskets apparently need to be nice and thin, so these are the proper spares gaskets. And that's so that when you bolt all of this up, one, it's oil tight, obviously, and two, you don't put too much strain on the little bridges inside there. And of course now you can't see it because I've put the rocker boxes on, but I did drill the holes for the oil. So I'm not sure how hard it'll be to remove one of these. I think there would have been fibre washers here originally, but I might get some of those, I think they're called Doughty washers, which are steel with sort of a rubber ring bonded to them. I think they're meant to be a lot more oil tight. It's a bit hard to see, but I don't want to pull the gasket off, I don't want to ruin the holes in it. But effectively what I ended up doing was drilling on an angle following the casting into the boss there. I just put a 1/4 inch hole through. I relieved just a little bit of the edge here so that I could get the drill bit down flat on that 45, and that seems to have worked fine. I was able to test it by basically pouring oil in here and making sure oil did drip out of that hole, which it does. Similarly on the back, we can't see it easily because I've painted everything, but I did, using the die grinder, just make a little groove there so the oil would find its way into that hole as well. But this should now, oops, I've lost a washer, I've lost 2 washers. This should now let me finish off the rocker gear. Oh, I'll get those later. Finish off the rocker gear, and I can then sit this on the block and do that final piece of piping. So these two will have blanking plugs, and the ones in the front will have the little banjos going to the Y pipe down here. The other thing, unfortunate thing I discovered, like I say, I TIG welded those with the special TIG hardening rod, and I'd previously got a new gas bottle, a new bottle of argon for the TIG welder, because the last one had gone empty, and I thought it's because I'd left the valve open, and it turns out that's not the case. I must have a leak in the system somewhere, because I've just been doing this today. It's about 5 o'clock now. I think I started about 10, and the welder's been on all day and it's completely out of gas. So either this crappy regulator is leaking or there's a leak somewhere in the system, which is most annoying, because that's another $100 worth of welding gas gone. I think that's kind of it for today. There was another small job that I'd done. I did a CAD drawing of this gasket that goes on the timing case cover, and then laser cut one out This was one of my early attempts, so I didn't quite get the shape right, which is why it's sticking out a bit here. I have more gasket paper on the way, and then I'll cut another one. But with the gasket paper in place, that let me measure the end float on here, and I was able to figure out what size thrust washer I need to take up the play on the intermediate gear. And I had some, this was actually out of a kingpin of an MGB. It's a one of the bushes in there, one of the thrust washers, sorry. So this is kind of sintered bronze, I believe. But I was able to turn that down on the lathe, and that'll fit in there nicely. And then with a suitable gasket, that'll fit on the end there, and that should take up the end float in that intermediate wheel. I may need to play with the thickness of this gasket just a little bit to be able to get that correct. I'm not sure exactly what it needs to be. I have seen a measurement which I'm sure said about 2 thou, which is very, very small, and to be honest, I don't see how that's possible with these casings and things, how you would get it that accurate. So I'm just going to go with not crashing around inside there. This is quite a tight fit on here, but I should be able to figure that all out once I actually get all this bolted up, and then I can shim behind there if I need to. Today is a public holiday, so I've had an extra day in the shed. The last 2 days have been raining pretty much the whole time, and today the rain stopped and it's got hot again. So it was up to 30 degrees in here again yesterday, where it's been 15 the last couple of days. And of course, because everything is wet, because it's been raining, it's really humid. The good thing is, though, the water tank is now full, or almost full. And you can see we put up a little indicator stick, level indicator thing on it. It's basically a float with a tube, and Charter helped me put that up at first. And her idea of straight and my idea of straight are two different things. She sort of looks in the general direction and says, yep, it's straight. Turns out it wasn't. So I had to go back up there and fix it. And I used my little angle finder gauge thing to make sure it really was straight. There's a little bit of wobble in the tube that the float's on, so you can never get it perfectly straight anyway. But that's a lot better. I just couldn't be in here machining things, trying to get everything nice and accurate and to as high a degree of precision as I can or as I need, and be looking out there and seeing that float thing being all wonky. I just couldn't do it. So I went up there again today and fixed it. But apart from that, I have been installing the rocker gear in the head, and this will have to come off again, of course, because I'll need to do up the head studs. But the good thing with the Riley 9 is the rocker gear is attached to the rocker covers. So undo these 3 nuts and the whole lot just lifts off. But I wanted to get it all nicely assembled and get the oil fittings and all of that kind of stuff in place, all sitting on the correct gaskets. I did have to trim around the gaskets at the front here to make room for the water takeoff, which will go in there. Depending on how I sort out the radiator, this will probably need to be cut off. It is quite interesting getting this in place, because you have to get that down in there so that it sort of grips from underneath, and then get this down over the stud. The only way I was able to do it before was actually hold this with tweezers down here, so enough of this stuck up that I could actually get the casting down over the top of it. But once that's in place, that won't be too bad. And you can see the rocker gear down inside here. It always amazes me that these sort of cast steel or forged steel rocker arms There's a spring in the middle of them to keep them in position, but there's no sorts of washers or anything on the ends here, so they just rub up and down against the side of the rocker housings, and I guess they just don't wear out. Everything is of course covered in oil. So when I installed the rocker shafts, there's 4 of them. They're sort of split, so there's one here and one here. I made sure all the holes in them did line up. I cleaned them all out, made sure all of the holes were free. I actually put all of the rocker gear, the shafts and everything in the ultrasonic cleaner and gave them a couple of cycles in that to make sure there was no dirt or anything in them. So they're all perfectly clean. A couple of the rocker shafts I was using were the later kind with the internal feed from the head, and they have an extra hole at the end. So I made sure that extra hole was on the rocker shafts that are at this end of the head, because the oil's coming in this way. I figured by the time it's got all the way along to there, that extra hole isn't going to make a difference, and it's effectively blocked up by the casting, the rocker cover anyway. So even if oil did leak out of that last tiny hole, it's already gone past everything it needs to. But you can see down in here, this is how you adjust the rocker gear. These have little ball ends which match the cups on the end of the push rods. So they'll push up on those. These screws, I believe, are 0BA hex head. I have heard of people replacing these, because what happens over time is the hex gets rounded off, and I've got a nice tiny little spanner that fits them. So you adjust the valve clearances and then you use these to lock things up. But if these little screws get rounded off, then you won't be able to get a spanner on them. And I have heard of people replacing them with Allen head screws, but I had a quick look online, but there's no way I can get 0BA Allen head screws easily in New Zealand, and it's not worth ordering. I found one place overseas that had them, and the screws were pretty cheap, but they wanted 30 quid for postage. So these will do for now. If I can get some, I will get some. Or new hex head ones, but all of these are in pretty good condition. I had so many spare parts, I was able to go through and pick the best of everything. I have fitted new springs in the middle here, even though I had lots of those. I just don't like reusing old springs because they just lose their springiness over the years. And if the originals are now 90 years old, you don't want one of those breaking. And I checked my ground rocker arms are all contacting the ends of the valves quite nicely. So I think that should be fine. You can also see how these rocker covers fit on. So all your valve adjusting has to be done through these covers. It's okay to get to the screws, but you have to get a feeler gauge down in here to measure the actual valve clearances. And then these covers just have this spring clip that clips over the spring, which I always find kind of interesting. So, I mean, they're quite strong. There's a cork gasket here. Getting these to seal can apparently be a bit of a pain, and when they don't seal, you end up filling up your spark plug holes with oil, apparently, which isn't good. The other thing I want to do is, it's another one of these things that's really hard to get hold of in New Zealand for some reason. We're just such a small market. You just can't get some stuff that you can get easily overseas. And I want to get a new piece of tube, and what I really want to use is phenolic resin tube. It would be 1 inch diameter, however long that is. That's, I don't know, 12-inch long. And this is for the spark plug wires. And this is just so that you can nicely arrange the plug wires. I would make little, probably brass or steel, sort of like P-clips that would come off those, and hold that up there like that, and it just tucks away all the wiring quite nicely. But I can't get that tube here. I haven't found anywhere that actually sells it here. And again, it's one of these things where if I try to order it from overseas, it's mostly industrial plastics type places who don't ship to New Zealand, or they want a ridiculous amount of money. So I'm looking at alternatives. I'll try and figure out something else I can use there. Even if I get a nice thick piece of cardboard tube and put some shellac over it or something like that, just so it looks a bit more period, would be quite nice. Just brown cardboard tubing, I'm sure, would be fine if I can get nice thick wall tubing. Again, I had a quick look for that sort of thing online, and it's just not easy to find. So that's all done. These are on here nicely. I've started looking at the front Y oil pipe and suddenly realized, going by these, which are the new banjos, this is another thing I need to figure out, is which way round do these go? And does it matter? And what washers are you supposed to use on them? There'll be a particular order for all this sort of stuff. So I've got a fiber washer and I've also got copper washers. I can use sort of a combination of those. This banjo has a little, you can sort of see the hole isn't the same size all the way through. There's a little step on there. Does that go facing out or facing in? I'm not actually sure. I think it would go this way round so that you're getting a better seal under the head of the bolt. And my idea would be use the copper washer there and then the fiber washer, or get another copper washer in there. So the oil comes up into the banjo, if I can get that on there, up into the banjo through that hole, down through that little feed hole, and then down through the bolt into the rocker shafts. So I'm guessing the right way is whichever way is more likely to seal. So it turns out these aren't 1/8 pipe, which is what I've got. It's 3/16, which explains why this kind of weird homemade one was bigger. So I've machined up a little brass fitting for the center part. I'll get hold of some 3/16 tube. And the other problem I've got is this thread. So this thread here matches, take this off, matches this. So that will screw onto there. This turns out to be a 5/16 by 24 TPI thread. So it's not Whitworth, and it's not one of the standard British standard pipe threads. I believe that is a UNF thread, which seems odd, but going through my little table book thing, that's the only 5/16 by 24 thread that I could find. So I've actually ordered a tap for that. Luckily that was available locally, and I think it was only about $3. It was actually a clearance item for an engineering shop. So I went through to see what else they had on clearance, and they had a few things. So 3 set, I think it was 0BA and 4BA tap sets for a couple of dollars. So I grabbed some of those, and they had some Whitworth studs and bits and pieces, really cheap, just cents really, 50 cents each sort of thing. So I grabbed a few of those just because it's handy to have that material around as stock. They also had a collet chuck, a small collet chuck, a ER25 I think it was, for $5, which might be a mistake, but I ordered that anyway. They had one left, so maybe it is legitimate, in which case I can look at adapting that to use on the lathe and the mill, hopefully. But this is all together now. I'm not sure, one of these rocker, there we go. Have to make sure these sit down. The springs on these are good. I think I've mentioned before, you do see aftermarket clamps which go on this stud here and hold these down, but the springs on these seem pretty good. Hopefully that'll be enough. I also made sure, went through, and when I assembled everything, there's oil everywhere. Inside all of the tubes, on all of the parts. So everything's oiled up, everything seems to move okay. I do have new tappets to go with these, mainly because the tappets go inside the engine. All the valve gear, I can always update it later, renew it later on if I need to, because you can get to it. The tappets aren't so easy because you have to take the camshafts and all that kind of stuff out. But I can't do any more on the actual block at the moment. I can't even fit the studs until I've fitted the final piston. So I'm still waiting just for those the new piston rings to arrive. I won't forget to gap them this time. What else? The other thing I did is went and dug out these old headlights that came with the parts car. These are proper Rotax lights, KL 590. And I was hoping I'd be able to reuse these, even if it was just cleaning them up and painting them, rather than having them sort of nickeled or chromed, whatever this is. But these are in really, really poor condition, unfortunately. You can see this is all bent. I can probably take the bases off. You can see they were originally riveted, but this one's been removed already and screwed in place. But somebody's had a go at these before, with a rock, I think. So the reflectors are all completely gone. This one looks like it was soldered in place, and that's kind of all broken. It's actually got splits in it. Don't think that has. I mean, this isn't even round anymore. But you can see how battered this is. It's missing its little badge. It's missing the clips that go in here. It's missing the bulb holder. And it looks like there was a massive crease all through here that somebody's hammered out, and it's cracked. This one is actually worse. It looks like it's been dropped on its mounting, so all of this is pushed in. Again, just so much damage on it. It does have its badge though. It's a little Rotax badge. But yeah, you can see this is all split through here. I haven't even managed to get these apart yet. But I don't know that there's much I can do with these, to be honest. I don't know that you could make these usable at all. So I'll have to be on the lookout. Oh, there we go. Be on the lookout for a better set. They're not cheap. Probably thousands of pounds, several £1,000s maybe, I think, for a nice set of these, maybe more. You know, you couldn't use it with the reflectors like that. I don't know if that would clean up at all. A little bulb socket might be okay. But yeah, that was a little disappointing. I remembered them being in slightly better condition than that, but unfortunately not. And those would normally mount sort of on these pillars, I guess. Sort of down in there. They're quite big. Yeah, even if I put a lot of effort into trying to get the metalwork nice again, it's probably all stretched to hell. Then I don't know what I'd be able to do about getting these, getting new reflectors. I don't know if you'd get these re-silvered or something. Like I say, this one, I don't know if it's actually broken or if it's different. They seem different. So I think that's something I'm just going to ignore for now. I'll put them back in the box and put them back up on the shelf. Interestingly, the box was completely full of baby spiders, like thousands and thousands of little tiny baby spiders. So I must have grabbed it just after they'd hatched out. I think that's pretty much it for now. I did dig out the clutch pedal. One of the things I need to figure out still is this splined linkage up here. The one I've got is wrong. There's two different sizes. I think I've mentioned this about 27 times already, but that goes on that spline shaft, and that's what the clutch pedal actuates. This one is for a different car where this sticks out a lot further. On this one, the pinch bolt would hit the bell housing. But I do have multiple of these. This is actually the piece that goes on the inside. So that goes in there. I can't remember which way round it goes, but that's what actually operates on the inside of the bell housing to move the clutch release backwards and forwards. And I've got a couple of spares of these, but it's the same spline. So what I am thinking is I will modify one of these so that it can bolt onto the spline shaft here, and I will weld a piece onto here for the linkage down to the clutch. That's why I dug this out, because it gives me an idea what the distance needs to be. But I think what I'm going to have to do is wait until I assemble everything with the clutch and gearbox in place and actually see how much motion I need to engage and disengage the clutch and work it out from there. The other thing worth noting is the clutch actually has a return spring on it. That's what this mounting is for. So I am going to have to figure that out as well. I suspect it'll be a similar sort of thing. There'll just have to be a spring on this somewhere, maybe a little tab on the bottom coming back to here so it's out of the way of your feet. But there needs to be a return spring on this somehow. I'm not sure how they did it on the originals. It's another one of those details that's very hard to see. And I need to make up the right sorts of spaces to go in here to get the pedal spacing correct and shorten this shaft. The throttle pedal will mount, I'll build a mounting that bolts it to the chassis rail, which is how it was done originally on the Brooklyns. I just don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but that's not really too hard to figure out. Yeah, I think that's it for this weekend.